First, my only comment on the topic of the cherry-picked, sentence-fragmented Mueller report is that I want the full report, all of it, including the appendices, both for the complete unpredigested information so that I can draw my own conclusions, and so that we won't imagine a Justice Department cover-up engineered by Trump's hand-picked protector. As of this writing, Attorney General Barr has indicated that he will release the complete Mueller report by mid-April. There will be redactions, perhaps lots of them. Some will be to protect ongoing investigations. Some redactions will be for national security reasons. Some will be to avoid causing embarrassment to, quote, peripheral innocent people, close quotes. I have no clue why that's more important than instilling confidence in the report for a skeptical public. Absent such confidence, we're facing an existential threat to our democracy. If you need insightful commentary on the entire Russia issue, including Mueller's report, read pal Dan Wallace's comments linked in the written post. Now to the issue of Venezuela. The Wall Street Journal ran a story about Russia's power play in Venezuela. Putin sent 100 troops there to prop up dictator Nicolas Maduro. In reaction to that, reader JC asked if there was anyone left in Washington who understands the Monroe Doctrine or remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis. My answers? No and no. As you'll recall from high school American history class, the Monroe Doctrine prohibits further European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. At the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Soviet Chairman Nikita Khrushchev was cultivating Cuba as a client state, effectively making it a colony of the Soviet Union, the very thing prohibited by the Monroe Doctrine. Soviet missiles armed with nuclear warheads on that island made it an existential threat to the United States. While President James Monroe couldn't have imagined nuclear weapons, he and his contemporaries were clear that the presence of European military might this close to home was an existential threat to our nascent country. The Monroe Doctrine was and is about our national security. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were thoughtful, careful men in charge who insisted upon best intelligence and carefully considered approaches to the challenges we faced. They had the strength of character to resist knee-jerk military actions, and they prevented a catastrophic war. This time, there's a reality TV personality in charge who doesn't read, who is incapable of assembling complex thoughts, who doesn't preview the president's daily brief so he doesn't know what's going on, who doesn't have sufficient self-control to resist temper tantrums, and who needs to be seen as the biggest, baddest, tough guy. He is supported by Secretary of State John Bolton, who never saw a conflict he didn't want to escalate into war. As bad, we have a horrendous record of starting conflicts without any plan to end them. For example, George W. Bush, dim-brained, lied us into a war in Iraq and Afghanistan with phantom promises of quick success and happily ever after flowers tossed at our troops by Iraqis. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared Iraqi oil would pay for the whole thing. None of that happened. What was foreseeable, but which they refused to foresee, was the global refugee problem they triggered and which the world lives with quite unsteadily now. It is a key outfall of Bush's lies, and we still don't have a plan to end those wars. Now that Russia has sent its troops into Venezuela, we are in a situation not unlike the Cuban Missile threat from the Soviet Union. President Trump backs Maduro's challenger, Juan Guaido. How will Trump stop Russia from both keeping Maduro in power and having that military foothold in the Western Hemisphere that is specifically forbidden by the Monroe Doctrine? In point of fact, Trump has been a disaster of a negotiator for the U.S. He's been a patsy with nothing to show for his capitulations to Russia and North Korea. Worse, he's been a lapdog for Putin, who is now threatening Trump's tough guy posturing. Trump has told Putin to back off. If Trump tries to negotiate with Putin to get him to do that, Trump's past negotiating prowess suggests that it will probably look like hollow posturing that leaves Russian troops in place in Venezuela with an escalating military presence in the Western Hemisphere. If instead Trump sends troops in support of Guaido, we'll be faced off against the Russians, and troops on both sides are likely to be killed. And there won't be an exit plan from the conflict. What could possibly go wrong? And another thing. The Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee called for Adam Schiff to resign his chairmanship of the committee based on the same kind of Republican partisan brainlessness that we've seen for years. Schiff replied with a kind of muscular statement rarely heard from Democrats. You can watch the whole thing via a link in the written post, and I urge you to do it. Last thing. Chris Hayes interviewed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, on Friday. There's a link to a string of videos from that interview in the written post. I urge you to watch all of them for one reason. It's not so that you'll agree with or find ways to pick apart the Green New Deal, or to find ways to cheer or criticize her. I want you to think on a higher level. Specifically, watch and listen in order to understand why she has so completely captured the public imagination. Our Gen X, Y, and Z citizens see our politics in the way that Emma Gonzalez sees our embedded intransigence over gun safety. Quote, "We call BS," close quotes. AOC speaks for an overwhelming majority of Americans, regardless of how much you may fundamentally disagree with her policy ideas or fear your own loss of power. To our legislators, get on board with working with people who see the future far differently than you do. If you don't want to do that, I suggest you polish your resume in preparation for entry into an exciting new career. That's because these folks know that they'll be the ones who will live with what we're creating right now. So they have a far more powerful interest in a sustainable future. We have created an existential threat to them, and they won't let us mess it up anymore. I'm Jack Altshuler.